moves. And the year started off with Adam giving a very powerful, fiery discussion at the SIM conference in February, where he said we basically have to blow up the whole system and start from scratch. And you know, TV and video have always been an ongoing evolution of audience measurement from, you know, in the old days, diaries, and then set meters, and then people meters, and then personal people meters, digital set-top data, and now ACR data. Somewhere along the way, GroupM actually created a framework for what both sides of the industry, supply and demand side, should probably be working towards, and Adam's been leading that initiative. And then most recently, speaking at the TVB's Forward Summit conference a couple of weeks back, he said something very provocative, and that's really why I wanted him on stage here, which is he said that, you know, really the solution for CTV, and in a lot of ways, the meta, is about measuring at the glass level and using the disparate, disorganized marketplace of ACR data that's evolved and bringing it together. So that's the background and the setup. So why don't we start with ACR and then we can work backwards from there. But you know, this technology kind of evolved. It was baked into the smart TV infrastructure, and these companies started creating for-profit businesses, largely either licensing or selling or making ad markets directly. You know, it's the big TV set manufacturers, you know, like Samsung and Vizio. And, you know, well, why don't I let Adam explain what ACR data really is and then why it's important for us to organize it in a better way.
Sure. Am I on? Yeah. So, I mean, look, ACR data at a macro level is essentially just the ability of middleware that's in the operating system of the TV to identify what's playing on screen at a given point in time using a variety of different mechanisms, whether that's audio-based or fingerprinting or watermarks associated with the content. And essentially, for those of you who don't know kind of how it works, there's a database of assets that the ACR provider is aware of, literally billions, if not trillions, of pieces of content that they have fingerprints for, right? They have kind of pixel definitions or audio content. For those of you who used to use Shazam in the music space, it's the exact same thing, right? So Shazam had a library database of every song that had ever been recorded. You could hold your phone up, and if the audio that the phone was recording matched audio that was in their database, they could identify the song. That's essentially what ACR data is, but for the TV screen. The issue is that not every OEM, every TV manufacturer, uses the same type of ACR methodology to track content on the screens that they control. And each of those TV providers has, up until now, pretty much gated the access to the data. So for those of you who are familiar with a company called iSpot, their data set is primarily based on Vizio ACR data. So it's only data coming from Vizio TVs. They've added LG, they've added a couple other smaller providers, but it's primarily Vizio. Samba, for those of you who work with Samba, uses, I think, up to 10 different smaller TV manufacturer data sets in their ACR-based platform. Then you've got Samsung that has their own kind of approach to ACR, and they've kind of got their content gated off separately. So if most of you are like me, I have 4 TVs in my house. They aren't all the same manufacturer. I've got a Vizio in my living room. I've got a Samsung in my office. I've got an LG in my bedroom. Think about the problem that creates if you're trying to measure viewing in a home, if every TV provider has gated access to what they understand is going on. Samsung will know what I watched on my Samsung TV, and their ACR data set will reflect what I watched on that TV in my household, but it will have no view into what I watched in my office or my bedroom. So if ultimately we work back to what marketers care about, which is the people they reach, the households they drive demand in, and where they affect purchase decisions, they want to look at households. They want to look at people in households and all the experiences they have with content on any screen that exists that they're engaging with. And so that's the underlying kind of premise of why I believe all these data sets have to be brought together. They have to be brought together consistently so that marketers and advertisers and platforms can use the data in a way that actually allows us to do what we're paid to do, which is to think about campaigns and drive business outcomes.
So it's a brilliant solution. Do you have any hopes that could happen? Are you doing anything to help organize it behind the scenes or in front of?
I mean, we've been very vocal as GroupM over the past year on a particular issue that you've reported on, continuous play, which was some work that we did to understand where there might be inflation in the counts of CTV impressions because of devices connected to TVs that might not know that a TV's turned off, and that they continue to stream content, call for ads, log ad impressions on the ad server, and ultimately charge the advertiser for something that never actually gets to the screen. You know, so that's been a big kind of focal point of ours, and it's led us to a lot of the broader work that we're now talking about with regards to the importance of bringing these data sets together. And more importantly, I think if you ladder that up to what has to happen more broadly in the video landscape, so not just around CTV and digital video, but how we tie that back to the linear TV environment. For those of you who are familiar with Nielsen, you know, the way that we measure and count linear TV ads and campaigns, Ed's laughing over there because he knows what I'm going to say, is completely disconnected and you know, 180 degrees different from how we measure and track digital campaigns. Nielsen is people-based, right? You mentioned a bunch of different data sets in your opening. A lot of people just think all those data sets are interchangeable. They're not. Nielsen counts people. ACR data counts devices and impressions on devices. It doesn't know how many people are in front of the TV watching. It doesn't know what their demographics are. Set-top box data counts devices. It counts exposure to a device. It doesn't know how many people are sitting in front of the TV. So as you bring, you know, ad servers count impressions logged to, you know, a device. So these things are not consistent. They're not combinable. And I think what you're starting to see a lot of the measurement companies focus on is how do we take these disparate sets of census level data that are very important, but that represent different things, and then model and personify them. So literally translate the device counts or the impression counts into counts of people. How do they take an impression that's shown on a TV, understand how many people are in the room, what their demographics are, and then be able to tie that back to the type of data that we've historically used in the TV space, which allows us to measure people, reach, and kind of keep key metrics like that.
So I know this all sounds wonky and might put you to sleep on the morning kickoff here, but this is really important because those numbers aren't just measurements, they're currency. This is what money is changing hands based on. And as you said, the TV industry's always been this amalgamation of hybrid technologies, measuring the next new thing in TV audience delivery. But let's get back to that Nielsen measures people, because I want to challenge that. Earlier this year, iSpot and GroupM did a really important benchmark study estimating that this continuous play phenomenon can inflate audience delivery by 10%. So that's a lot of money in the CTV marketplace. But let's go back. If you think about how Nielsen measures people, put aside diaries, which I think are maybe phased out by now, the people meter just is a device in a room. Yeah, people are supposed to interact with and press it every once in a while, but how do you know he's not making a cup of coffee or any other room, surfing, streaming something on his phone? You know, we never really knew that. So why is this any different? There's a certain leap of faith in measurement, right?
So is the question, why is continuous play different from?
Well, that we've always been dealing with inflation and deflation in audience measurement, and smart people like GroupM's activation and planning teams know how to estimate around that. Why is this part different and important?
So, no measurement is perfect, and no measurement is ever going to be perfect. You know, we can debate the merits of whether Nielsen's data for the past 60 years has been good or not good. My general point of view on Nielsen is that, you know, early on it probably was a much more stable data set. And when I say early on, I mean kind of back in the 70s and the 80s. Just that's what I mean by early on, when we had 3 networks and just a few cable networks and there wasn't huge fragmentation, because a panel of their size was much better able to be representative in that world. In a world of hundreds or thousands of cable networks and the fragmentation that we've seen, the panel size has become an issue. And we saw that exacerbated during the pandemic when they couldn't do their home visits and panel recruitment and kind of replenishment. So, but at the end of the day, there's a methodology there that they've refined over decades. They have pretty strict, you know, qualifications for how households are kind of impaneled. They do checks on, you know, whether households are doing the things that they're supposed to be doing in terms of when you leave a room, pressing a button and saying that you left a room, when a second person enters a room, pressing a button to say that that second person is in the room. But the reason continuous play is different, and here's what I would argue, is that the TV is on and there is a delivery of an ad in a scenario where someone gets up off the couch, goes into another room, okay? If they don't press the button. So the ad delivery is actually still happening. There is an opportunity for the viewer to see it. They've just made themselves unavailable at that point in time. And there's a big difference. I mean, opportunity to see has been kind of a key principle of the media industry and measurement industry for a long time. Continuous play, the ad is never delivered, because the ad never actually makes it to the screen. There is no physical way that anyone could see the ad, hear the ad, or know that the ad existed, right? Because the TV screen is off. It is a phantom impression that is logged by an ad server simply because the device, the stick, the puck, or the gaming console, the app running on that device made an ad call to a publisher's ad server, called for content, and called for an ad. And it was logged on the publisher side and charged to the advertiser. I believe that's a very different situation than if content is on the screen and the viewer has chosen to leave the room. To me, that's a measurement issue. There needs to be tighter measurement on understanding who's in the room. And there are solutions now that have started to roll out for folks who are aware of T-Vision, for example, which is a panel, but it actually has the ability to identify number of people in the home and whether their eyes are on screen. That data, that engagement data, married to Nielsen data to calibrate it, could be very useful to overcome the situation that we're talking about. But to me, the continuous play issue is a different issue. It's a problem caused by technology that was an unintended consequence of us now having multiple devices tied together to deliver content to a screen.
Okay, so I asked you earlier, I'll ask it again, if you have any hopes that some co-op will come together around this, and if not, what do you do about it? Can't you just benchmark this every once in a while and index it and negotiate on that basis?
You can, but it's not a problem that is consistent across every publisher at the same rate, right? So in the early work that we've done, and I want to, I preface this whenever I speak about it publicly because I want to be fair to the publishers and I want to be fair to the sell side. The work that we've done so far is a phase 1 study. It relied on the iSpot data, which was Vizio TVs only. Granted, it was 20 million TVs, so it's a large data set, but it didn't have representation from LG or Samsung or Sony or any of the other manufacturers. what a publisher would say is, well, how do you know that a Samsung TV doesn't operate differently than a Vizio TV? Maybe a Samsung TV actually does pass the signal properly from the TV to the device through the HDMI port, or maybe it has a different rate of incidence for for continuous play. So, you know, there's a lot of questions about whether the data sets that we've used are the proper benchmarks. We believe they are, for a number of reasons, mainly because most HDMI ports are all manufactured by, they're basically one or two companies that manufacture the HDMI ports that all the TV OEMs use. So there's that issue. There's also an issue of more recent smart TVs have used a standard called CEC for their HDMI ports, which require certain signals to pass back and forth between the device that you might have connected to the TV and the TV. Problem is that on many TVs that's user enabled, so you can turn it off. You can turn off the CEC protocol so that your TV and your device don't talk to each other. We found in our phase 1 work that different types of publishers have different rates of continuous play, and different types of platforms or devices cause different types of rates of play. I'll give you an example. Gaming consoles in our analysis had a much lower, not much lower, a lower rate of continuous play when they were connected to TVs than kind of traditional sticks and pucks that you would think of. Anyone want to venture a guess why? Who's a big gamer in the room? No one. Who has kids who are big gamers? Okay. So I'm not a gamer either, but as we thought about it, it made logical sense. When you have an Xbox or a PlayStation sitting on your shelf or your floor next to your TV, it makes a lot of noise. It's got a fan, it's got lights that flash. So when you're done with it, you turn it off. If you turn the console off, it stops calling content, so it eliminates the problem of continuous play. When you have a stick or a puck that's plugged into your TV, it's invisible. It's behind your TV. You can't see it. It doesn't have a fan. It doesn't have lights. You don't think about turning it off necessarily. Sometimes, you know, this problem happens when you've got two remotes, one for your device, one for your TV, and you turn your TV off. And you don't think to either hit pause on your device or turn your device off. That's what causes this problem. So there are different rates of continuous play based on device, and then there are different rates of continuous play that we found based on the type of content that's being consumed. The thing that led us to this study was me watching Bosch on Amazon Prime one night, turning off in season 2, episode 2, and then the next night firing up my Amazon Prime and being told that I had watched all 5 seasons. And I started to question how that happened. And the reason was I had a Fire Stick plugged into a TV. The TV didn't communicate to the Fire Stick. I turned my TV off, didn't turn my Fire Stick off. The Fire Stick kept running for 40 episodes. Now, Amazon's not ad supported, but others are. And that's what led us to start doing the work.
Not ad supported yet.
Right. So I don't think you can benchmark. I mean, the short answer to my question is I don't think you can benchmark because every publisher, depending on their distribution, is going to have a different rate of continuous play.
Oh, we have time for audience questions? Any questions? I have a lot.
I have one as well if, I'm just curious about.
Barbara?
Okay, so my dad likes to turn off the volume whenever he sees ads on TV playing. Is there a way to know when a user turns off the volume, like goes on mute, and isn't listening to your ad? They might maybe glance at it, but is there a way to know when they can't hear the audio for it?
Yeah, does ACR work with audio off?
I mean, some is enabled with audio, some is not. So, I mean, this gets back to the different types of ACR methodology that are being used by different OEMs. So, again, this gets back to standardization for the industry.
Right. So, I mean, on that note, this has been an ongoing problem for the industry. Technology's been evolving, it's accelerating, and we probably don't even know what we're going to be consuming media on in some AI-enabled virtual reality scenario 5, 6 years from now, maybe, right?
Yeah, I mean, imagine a world where you're watching TV through a headset, you know, an Oculus.
Right.
How are we measuring that? What's the new standard for how we collect that data?
So you released a framework earlier this year for the industry overall. How does that scenario fit into how you're planning out the near future?
Well, I mean, the framework that we announced was more of just a desire to have some form of measurement in place to collect data on continuous play, and if publishers weren't ready to move forward with that, to at least recognize that there are steps we can take to minimize continuous play that everyone should be trying to do their best to enact. So one of the things that's rolled out over the last couple of years is many of you probably receive "Are you still watching?" end cards. Anyone get that? Your streaming service stops, asks you, "Are you still watching?" Most publishers implement that at the 4-hour mark, which is nice, but it still means the TV could have been off for 4 hours and content could have been playing. So another finding from our initial research was a publisher who implements the "Are you still watching?" card at the 2-hour mark has a much lower rate of continuous play than publishers who implement at the 4-hour mark. So one of the things that we're asking as GroupM is for the industry to set a standard around what's the right place for that end card to exist. And by the way, it might be different in different types of content. The pushback you get from publishers is, well, if someone's watching a football game lasts 3 hours. They don't want to be getting, "Are you still watching?" in the middle of the game. That's annoying. My argument back is, well, what about if after 11 o'clock at night, when we know most people are lying in bed and they might fall asleep, you actually run the end card more quickly? Because let's at least recognize that, you know, there are certain parts of the day where identifying whether someone's fallen asleep and the TV's just running is probably more useful. So I think there's work the industry can do to set standards around how those end cards are implemented. We're not going to eliminate this problem. There are tens of millions of TV sets and hardware devices, sticks and pucks, that are in the market that cannot be auto-updated through a firmware update. So until that hardware cycles out of people's homes, this problem is going to exist. Now, it might exist at a lower and lower rate, but there's a combination of things that we need to do as an industry. We need issues like the end card address standard set. We need measurement solutions in place so we can at least gauge the rate of occurrence consistently. And then we need agreements on how we fairly reconcile. The risk shouldn't all be on the advertiser side or the publisher side. We need to share the risk until the problem is solved.
Okay, well, do we have a question? Or
I'm just curious why you couldn't do something like you did in digital video, digital ads, where you, GroupM, actually mandated the viewability. Maybe that's something you could do from the buy side and push.
Increase the standard.
Well, we can do that, and we actually have a solution to do that today with the iSpot platform that we've built. There is a unified measurement tag that iSpot has rolled out that many publishers accept, and the TV on-off capability is now measurable through that solution. We would like to adopt that with everyone that we do business with, and use it as a guide to help us understand what the rates are. The problem is publishers have to accept the tag. I can't do it unless a publisher agrees to run the tag. And there are a number of publishers that no longer accept tags or pixels, and we have to do that through a clean room environment or some kind of server-to-server integration. So there aren't consistent ways of doing it, but it requires publisher involvement and engagement.
Joe, you had mentioned earlier that all of this measurement and the flaws in measurement lead up to a bigger issue, which is currency. Adam, where do you see currency going with all of the partners that have come out over the last year, coming out of the woodwork? They all have their strengths and weaknesses, but do you see the currency has to change in the next 1 to 2 years? Where do you see that going?
Look, there are a number of folks who are working vigorously to either kind of refine their existing solution, i.e. Nielsen, moving to Nielsen 1. And the initial demos that we've seen and data sets that we've seen are actually, it's very promising. The dashboard looks great. There are alternatives that are rapidly kind of evolving their solution set. There are a host of them, whether it's ComScore or VideoAmp or iSpot, and there are others. To your point, Ed, they all are coming at this from different angles, either using census level data sets and trying to personify back to people, or using, calibration models. They all have gaps, they all have holes. We're participating as GroupM in a number of currency trials that the publishers are running with a variety of those providers. We're seeing promising results in the way that they're able to count, but there is still some significant variation between what we see from one provider to another measuring or attempting to measure the same thing. And that's to be expected. These are new solutions. The models have to be trained. Nielsen's been doing this for 70 years. You don't just start up a measurement company and figure it out in 12 months. So we've got some work ahead of us. But I do think there will be alternatives, and I think we're going to live in a multi-currency world moving forward.
Well, if I can follow up on that with a wrap-up question.
Actually, well,
Do we have time?
all right, go ahead, Bits.
Okay, just real quickly, this is one of my personal concerns. Nielsen didn't operate in a vacuum. There is a self-regulatory authority, the Media Rating Council. And what we're seeing right now is a lot of certifications coming from suppliers. I think even GroupM has certified some of these suppliers. But at the same time, we have an industry self-regulatory body. You have the ANA working on something. Don't we need some unified standards here? And once the MRC builds a viewability standard, you can modify on that based on your negotiations. So just a real quick point of view on that.
Yeah, no, I'm a firm believer the MRC should set standards and guidelines for what we measure and how we measure it. And I think measurement companies should be judged based on their adherence to those principles. I do have an issue with, I don't think GroupM has certified any. We've announced that we're working with,
right.
But we haven't given a certification, if you will. And I don't think it's appropriate for individual publishers to be certifying measurement solutions. I think the industry and industry bodies need to take that on, and I think there probably needs to be a different approach to how that's done that involves the ANA, the 4As, the VAB, the MRC more collaboratively.
Okay, well, I think we're out of time.
Great, yes,
Well,
that
thank
was,
you.
we could let you go on forever, Adam. So thank you so much. Thank you, Joe. That was awesome. Everyone.